I noticed it before anyone else did, which I think is the part that bothers me most when I look back on it. Not because noticing made me special, because it means I had 3 extra weeks to do something, and I spent those 3 weeks doing nothing. My name is Dex, and I do roofing work, commercial mostly, some residential. I've spent the better part of 10 years on top of buildings, which means I've spent the better part of 10 years looking at the sky. I know what clouds are supposed to do. I know how they move, how they build, how they break up and reform. I know the difference between a front sitting over an area for a few days and something that genuinely isn't moving. The clouds over Crestfall hadn't moved in 3 weeks. Not shifted, not changed shape, not broken apart and reassembled the way cloud cover does even on the stillest days. The same grey-white layer, the same height, the same density, sitting over our town like a ceiling someone had painted on and forgotten about. The news called it an unusual weather system, a stationary high-pressure event. The meteorologists on the evening news used a lot of confident language, and none of it explained what I was seeing from the rooftops every day, which was cloud cover that looked less like weather and more like a floor. The job in late September was a commercial flat roof on a 3-story building on the east side of town, which put me at about 40 feet up, high enough to see over most of the surrounding structures, low enough that the cloud layer still looked like a normal overcast sky when I glanced up at it. My co-worker that week was Bram, who'd been doing this kind of work about as long as I had and had the good quality of not needing to talk constantly to fill the silence. We worked well together. He showed up on time, did the job right, and had exactly the right instincts about when something was worth mentioning. On the second day of that job, he looked up from what he was doing and said, "You notice the birds?" I looked up. We were surrounded by the usual city birds, pigeons, sparrows, a few starlings, doing what they always do, moving in clusters between rooftops and gutters and window ledges. "What about them?" I said. "Watch where they go," he said. I watched. It took a few minutes to see it, because it wasn't a dramatic thing. But once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. Every bird that flew upward, not just gliding between spots, but actually gaining altitude, banked away before a certain point. Not all at once, not in a flock, individually, as if each one made a private decision. A pigeon would take off from a ledge and climb, and then, at maybe 60 or 70 feet, it would turn, just curve away, smooth and casual, and drop back down. None of them flew higher than that. "How long has that been happening?" I asked. Bram shrugged. "I only noticed today. Might have been going on longer." We both looked up at the cloud cover, about 200 feet above us, grey-white and completely still. "Probably something with the air pressure," I said. Bram made a sound that wasn't agreement or disagreement and went back to work. I kept watching the birds for the rest of the afternoon. There's a woman named Tess who lives in the apartment building across from mine. We'd talked a handful of times over the years, in the parking lot, at the mailboxes, the kind of neighborly relationship that doesn't go anywhere in particular, but is always pleasant. She was in her 40s, worked some kind of remote job, spent a lot of time on her balcony. I ran into her in the parking lot on a Thursday evening, and she asked me if I'd noticed the cloud cover. I told her I had. She said she'd been photographing it. That surprised me enough that I stopped walking. Photographing it, why? I asked. Because something felt off about it, she said, in the matter-of-fact tone of someone who'd been sitting with an idea long enough that they'd gotten comfortable with it. I've been taking a photo from my balcony every morning at the same time since the second week. Same angle, same zoom. She paused. You want to see something? We went up to her apartment, which I'd never been in before. It was tidy, a lot of plants, a camera on a tripod near the balcony door. She opened her laptop and pulled up 3 photos side by side. First photo, cloud cover, grey-white, filling the upper third of the frame. She'd used the roofline of the building across the street as a reference point. Second photo, 1 week later, same cloud cover, but the roofline was slightly larger in the frame, or the clouds were slightly closer to it. Third photo, that morning. The gap between the clouds and the reference roofline was noticeably smaller than in photo 1. How much has it dropped? I asked. About 30 feet in 3 weeks, she said. Roughly 10 feet a week, sometimes more, sometimes a little less, but it's consistent. I looked at the 3 photos for a while. The news is still calling it a high-pressure system, I said. I know, she said. Have you told anyone? I put it in a local Facebook group, she said. Got some likes. A few people said they'd noticed it too. Mostly people said I was measuring wrong. She closed the laptop. I'm not measuring wrong. I believed her. The photos were clear. I went home and stood on my own balcony for a long time, looking up at the clouds that hadn't moved in 3 weeks, trying to do the math in my head. 30 feet in 3 weeks, 10 feet a week. The cloud layer had looked to me like it was sitting around 200 feet up when I'd first started paying attention. 20 weeks at that rate, maybe a little more. 20 weeks until it was at rooftop level. I told myself the rate would change, that weather systems moved, that whatever pressure was holding this in place would shift eventually. I told myself this was still within the range of explainable things, and I went inside and made dinner and watched something on TV and went to bed. I almost had myself convinced. The job that changed everything was a water tower access project about 2 miles from my apartment. Not a roofing job exactly. We'd been brought in to reseal the access platform on a water tower that sat on a hill on the north side of town, which put the platform at just about 130 feet above ground level. Highest I'd been in years on a local job. Bram was with me. We drove out on a Wednesday morning, got set up, and climbed. The view from the platform was good. You could see most of Crestfall laid out below, the grid of streets, the clusters of buildings, the residential areas spreading out toward the edge of town. Normal enough, but we were higher than we usually worked, and the cloud layer looked different from here. Closer, obviously. At 40 feet, it had been just sky above us. At 130 feet, it filled the upper portion of the view more completely, heavy and grey-white, sitting maybe 60 or 70 feet above our heads. And at this distance, something was wrong with it. I noticed it before Bram did. I was standing at the railing, looking up while he got the equipment sorted, and I was looking at the underside of the cloud layer. And what I was seeing wasn't what clouds look like from below. Clouds from below are soft, they're uneven. They have variations in density and color, lighter patches where the sun hits them, darker areas where they're thicker. They shift and move even slightly when you watch them. What was above me was uniform, the same color in every direction, the same texture, nothing varying, and the texture itself was wrong. Not the wispy, layered look of cloud cover, but something more consistent, almost like a surface. Not flat exactly, more like the way skin has pores and variations up close, but reads as a single continuous thing from a distance. It wasn't moving, not at all, not in any direction, not in any small way. Bram came to stand next to me and looked up. Neither of us said anything for a while. "Dex," he said finally. "Yeah," I said. "That's not clouds." "No," I said. "I don't think it is." We stood there looking up at it. I think we were both doing the same thing, which was trying to find an explanation that would let us go back to thinking it was weather. The way you keep looking at something, trying to find the angle that makes it normal. The underside of it moved. Not much. Not in a way that would have been obvious from the ground, but at 130 feet, close enough that the scale of it filled our field of vision completely. We both saw it. A slow, subtle movement, like the surface of still water when something stirs it from deep below. Just once, a long, slow ripple passing across the visible section directly above us. And then it was still again. I grabbed Bram's arm and we both stepped back from the railing without discussing it. "We need to get down," I said. "Yes," he said. We left the equipment on the platform and climbed down and got in the truck and drove away from the water tower without talking. We were halfway back to the shop before either of us said anything. "What do we do?" Bram asked. "I don't know," I said. "We should tell somebody." "Tell them what?" He didn't answer that, because there wasn't a good answer. We'd seen something from 130 feet up that you couldn't see from the ground. Everyone below us was still looking at cloud cover and seeing weather. What were we going to say? We saw it move. We thought it looked like skin. I thought about the birds that wouldn't fly above 60 feet. I thought about Tess's photos, 30 feet in 3 weeks. I thought about the thing I'd seen ripple above me, slow and enormous, the way something moves when it's alive and very, very large. I went back to Tess that evening and told her what I'd seen. She listened to all of it without interrupting, the way she'd listened when she showed me the photos, like someone who'd already made room for the answer to be something they didn't want it to be. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "I've been thinking about the rate," she said, "the descent." "Me too. It's been going faster this week," she said. She turned the laptop to show me. She'd added photos since the last time I'd been here. Daily now instead of weekly. Monday, it was here. She pointed. This morning, it was here. She pointed to the next photo. More than 10 feet in 3 days. "It's speeding up," I said. "Gradually," she said. "But yes." I sat with that. Outside her balcony door, the evening sky was the same uniform grey-white it had been for almost a month. From the ground, it looked like a cloudy evening. Nothing alarming, just weather. "Does anyone else know?" I asked. "Anyone who's been up high enough to see what it actually is?" "I've been asking around online," she said. Carefully, without saying exactly what I'm asking. "A few pilots have mentioned being rerouted around our area, but they're not saying why publicly." A guy who does cell tower maintenance about 30 miles east said he refused a job last week without explaining his reasons. She closed the laptop. I think some people know. I don't think anyone knows what to do with knowing. I went home and stood on my balcony in the dark and looked up. From here, it just looked like clouds. Overcast, quiet, ordinary. The kind of sky you stop noticing after a while because it doesn't ask anything of you. I thought about what was underneath it, the surface I'd seen from the tower, uniform and vast, covering the entire sky above Crestfall in every direction as far as I could see from 130 feet up. Something so large that the human brain, encountering it from below, had just decided it was weather and moved on. I thought about the ripple, that single slow movement, something enormous, something alive, something that had been descending slowly, steadily, for at least 3 weeks, longer, probably, before anyone started measuring. I went inside. I double-checked the locks, which I knew was irrational since whatever was above us wasn't going to be stopped by a locked door. I just needed to do something with my hands. That was 11 days ago. I haven't been back on the water tower. I've been keeping my jobs to lower buildings, flat roofs, nothing that gets me close to where I don't want to be. Bram has been doing the same without us discussing it. We haven't talked about what we saw, not directly. Sometimes on the job, he'll glance up at the sky and I'll see something move through his expression, and then he'll look back down and keep working. Tess sends me a photo every morning. The layer is at about 110 feet now, down from the 130 or so where we'd seen it from the tower, moving faster than it was in the first week, faster than it was in the second. The news is still calling it a high-pressure system. There was a segment on the local station last week about how unusual it was, the meteorologist looking cheerful about it the way they look cheerful about all weather, as if the job has trained them to be interested in everything the sky does, rather than scared by any of it. People in town have started making jokes about it, how they miss seeing blue sky, how they hope it clears up before the holidays. Normal things people say when the weather is boring. I don't correct them. I don't know what I'd say. I saw something from 130 feet up, and I'm still not entirely sure what I saw, except that it was alive, and it was moving, and it was close enough to reach out and touch from where I was standing, if I'd been stupid enough to try. I didn't try. Bram didn't try. We did the right thing, and we came down, and we drove away. But here's what I find myself thinking about. Lying awake at night, while the city goes quiet below what everyone else still calls the clouds. It knows the birds won't go above 60 feet. The birds figured that out on their own. Some instinct saying, turn here, bank away here, don't go past this point. And whatever is up there, whatever has been descending slowly, week by week, covering the sky above this town, whatever it is, it's been up there long enough that the birds have established a boundary, which means it's been there longer than 3 weeks. Much longer, maybe. It's just that 3 weeks ago, it came low enough to see. I do the math every morning when Tess's photo comes through. Every morning the number gets smaller. Every morning the gap between what's up there and the tops of the tallest buildings in town gets a little narrower. I don't know what it wants. I don't know if it wants anything. I don't know if something that size thinks in terms of wanting. I just know it's still coming down. And I know that whatever the birds have been doing, keeping below 60 feet, staying close to the ground, never going higher than something in them says is safe. I've been doing the same thing since we climbed down from that water tower, staying low, keeping my head down, looking at the ground more than the sky. It's not a plan. It's not even really a decision. It's just what you do when you've been up high enough to see something that the rest of the world isn't looking at yet, and you've come down, and you're waiting to find out what happens when it arrives.